Baljit, I wanted to start with your background, how you got into Sikhi. So,
Okay, I've not been asked that one for a long time. So, when you first get into Sikhi, you get asked that question quite a lot. And then, because I've been doing Prachar as well for about over 10 years now, but it's been a while since I've been asked that question. But so it would date back to basically, we're talking about 1997 is when I had my first encounter with Sikhi or was kind of informed of Sikhi. And it was, I think for like a lot of people, it wasn't through choice. So it wasn't through, oh, look, everything's great, and I was enticed by this path. So it was like, we're talking about 25 years ago nearly. And back in those days, as you know, we didn't have these means. There was no YouTube, there was nothing of the sort. And so I grew up in a very cultural upbringing, Punjabi household. So didn't have any exposure to Sikhi other than just popping to the Gurdwara, but sometimes on a Sangrand with my mum, which would be at Saharod Gurdwara, Nishkam, and weddings, and that was it really. So there was a lot going on at home, including with myself and with my sister, and which was, it's all kind of like the dots join, don't they? Everything's interlinked. My dad, he was very hard, working factory worker, and always took care of his family financially, and just a nice guy, but he had the drinking side. So he was a binge drinker, and on the weekend, as hard as he worked, on the weekend he would binge drink, and that would lead to kind of like 3-4 days, and there was always a lot of shame around that for like growing up as a kid, and felt like it was quite embarrassing seeing him in that state. And so that's kind of a very, very like small gist of like what was going around, what became normal, but it in the same breath, it wasn't normal, but it was almost like normal to us, if that makes any sense. And so with that, I got into a similar lifestyle, but with a step further. So I was only young and grew up in Handsworth, and at the age of like 13 odd, 12, 13, got into drinking because it was just the norm of where I lived, society, and what I saw at home. But what was on top of what I saw at home was the smoking, and then like smoking weed. And when I got to about 16, there was a lot going on, and my sister was going through a very difficult patch, who's just about 2 years older than me. And there's loads of family members, loads of people trying to help kind of get us out of this rut of a lifestyle, and be it relationships, the drinking, smoking, and it was almost like this. It was like an angel that appears. So a cousin that is 15 years older than me, he turned up. His name's Baljit Singh. He turned up to our house. We wasn't expecting him. We wasn't a cousin that we saw very often, and he hadn't actually even been to our house before up until that time. So somebody's told him that we're in a really difficult situation. There's a lot of issues going on at home, and he's just turned up, and he took us to the Gurdwara in Smethwick in Cape Hill, to Nanaksar. And at that time, Mahapurkh was visiting Baba Gurdev Singh Ji, Bhai Ki Smaad Wale, who did seva of Baba Ishar Singh Ji, Kalera Wale. And Babaji now is like well into their 80s, I think about 87. So Babaji would have been around, just in their 60s then. And like we had no exposure to Mahaprabhu. We heard about Mahaprabhu. I got darshan of Baba Narang Singh after Baba Puran Singh as a little kid, but didn't have a clue what it was all about, what was going on. That was just like, it was almost like I'd say fluke, but you know, it's never a fluke to be sat in the presence of a Mahaprabhu. But so my dad was one to not speak very highly of Mahaprabhu's and sons, but when he's now found himself in a situation struggling with his with his own children, with his own kids, and especially like there was a very specific situation going on with my sister. So he's brought us to the Gurdwara, and this is in May '97, and so we are now. It's been arranged for us to go in and see the Mahaprabhu. And this is, remember, a 16-year-old kid, pretty, I was always very humorous, cocky, like, very pleasant, but just had bad habits, but very polite, pleasant, loved family. And my life was about enjoying yourself. It was about pleasure. It was about just, getting smashed, having a laugh. And I was always a bright kid. I was always caring as well. But just had all those other things that came with it. And I didn't really have this belief or faith in God, and I had no knowledge of religion or Sikhi, and I remember very specifically when I was about 15 going through this. It's almost like a depression type, but like now thinking back to it, where I'd think that life's just like when you die, it's just a black hole, and there's nothing. And the word atheist didn't even really exist then in my world, so I didn't know what it was I was going through, but there was a lot of fear around ending and death for me. So it was just like, that's it, and it's done. There's nothing. But for the first time in my life, other than being intoxicated and smoking a lot of weed, when I was walking, as we were walking into the Mahaprabhu's room before we had entered, I had just these sensations go through my body, and all these things like the barb, you would say, or the dark side kind of started to flash before my eyes. I started to feel overwhelmed, and I just thought, like, what is this? Like, he's just another guy, he's just another human being who we're going to meet. But the moment we walked in, it was different, and it was like just this aura of light, as I can, and that's from speaking of somebody that didn't have exposure, didn't know anything of spirituality, didn't have any knowledge of that, and I just thought, there's something here. My whole body has changed, everything, something's going on. So when we sat down, and Mahaprabhu looked at my dad straight in the eye and said, Hanji Dasoji, like, tell me what brings you here. And my dad just looked up and felt kind of almost like very ashamed and said, Bacche galat raste lag gaya ji, like, and kids have gone off kind of the rails. And never have met Babaji before at that point, Baba Gurudev Singh, and nobody went in and told them about us. And they just looked my dad straight in the face. They said, Tusi sahi raste hain ji? And they said, are you on the right path? And my dad just froze, because he wasn't expecting that, because he thought, well, I've come here for my kids. And because for him, well, he's an adult, his drinking's okay, but actually the problem was always his drinking, where everything stemmed from. Even I had a lot of childhood anxieties and around my dad drinking, and that's another story of its own. So it's quite ironic that Mahaprabhu actually, straight after they said "Tusi sahi raste," and nobody had spoke of alcohol that my dad drinks or the kids drink, but Babaji, because we came for a different situation, and it was more about being in certain relationships. So, which, I'm not going to go into. But the second thing Baba Ji said to my dad was that, "Tusi peeni hai ji, ta bachchiyan ne bhi peeni hai ji." And I was like, how does this guy know this? Like, so basically saying that if you're going to drink alcohol, your children are going to drink it too. And I was like, yo, how does he know this? But I didn't. It's almost like I didn't even need to say that, because it was almost at that point I was experiencing something that is beyond what I had known of this world, something beyond my senses, and the pleasure that I knew, that I just thought life was about pleasure, and I thought, like, there's something beyond here. He isn't just this guy is just, he's not on our plane. And in that moment, yes, there was that question, how does he know? But in the same breath, I knew that he's something beyond, and I didn't know that existed in the world. So that's where a journey started from. And as we came out, there was the Mahant who was in charge of that particular Gurdwara. His name was Baljit Singh. Everybody called him Bhai Ji or Baba Ji. And they said, "Si Amrit Shaklo Parvar." And we didn't even know what that meant. It's so alien to us, that world. And but we initially did at that time, which was on the 1st of June 97. As a family, we took Amrit. But after that,
was that the first day when you met Babaji?
As in, like, we met Babaji about 4 or 5 days before that, and then there was an Amrit Sanchar the Sunday after.
Wow.
And then they said, first they said Amrit Shaklam. We was like, what? I didn't even know what that meant. Like, what I just knew, like, oh, like, you can't drink anymore. Like, and I remember my family specifically saying, look, we'll do it, but he's not going to be able to, like, kind of live without meat. And so they said, like, so that's kind of where our journey initiated from, and had plenty of kind of roller coasters and ups and downs there. Didn't within the next 10 years, I didn't always maintain that lifestyle of keeping to that I had, but that was the first initial kind of starting point.
How did you make the transition from a completely lifestyle to such a big transition?
So that's kind of where the journey started from, and there was that was like the first turning point, but then there was a second turning point from when I really kind of fell in love with Gurbani, and that was about 11 years later. 11 years later.
But I want to hear that. But just to go into this in a little bit of detail, because I think of people who are struggling with something like alcohol addiction, or even just the addiction to tastes and pleasures, and so to even give it up for a day, from going from someone who used to drink alcohol, used to eat whatever they liked, or copious amounts of meat. How did you find that transition? Was that how did you even manage a day?
I think what happened was, because at that point, I was just doing my GCSEs, and I think I was just kind of more or less was finishing off my GCSEs at that point. And I did a lot better than I expected. Again, like I said, I was very kind of smart kid, but just messed around so much. I didn't even go to sit some of the exams, because they said you didn't turn up to enough lessons. So they said there's no point even coming for the exam. So, but I still did decent enough to get onto some A levels. But at that point, so because the summer holidays were coming up, the only way for me was to jump, like, deep in. And because you know when you grow up in adolescence, when you are, you know, drinking, smoking, doing all of these things, you know, in relationships, it affects your brain when you are using, you know, things like that at that age. It really shapes you a certain way. So I had a very addictive personality and very kind of extreme. And I think I used that about me to then kind of that being extreme to jump into then Sikhi. And actually at that time I spent a lot of time at the Gurdwara in the Sharan of the Mahapurkh of Baba Gurjan Singh the Mahant. Not Baba Gurdev Singh, because they would travel. They left after a few months they stayed mainly in Houston. But Baiji then, who actually, it was like they took me under their wing, but they knew, and he would say that, you know, tu ithe rehna hai, because he could just see that if he doesn't go all in, he's not going to be able to survive this path. So for me, how did I go from that level of addiction to alcohol, smoking, to that at that point was the transition had to be was I kind of had to throw myself in like completely, where then I had to disassociate from a lot of people that I was hanging out with that time, which made it easier anyway because it was some holidays coming up. So I was introduced to, you know, different sangat, but spent hours and hours just learning Gurbani at that age. First learning Gurmukhi and sitting in the Diwan a lot. Remember, we didn't have distractions like phones. So it would be when there was, because Nanak Sahib is very known for Kirtan, and so the Amrita Velas, like it starts at 2 o'clock. So I'd started staying nights at the Gurdwara, and then I would sit in the Kirtan from the morning, like from 4:30 till 6:30, and then would rest in the day. So when you'd go out about in the day, when you meet up with certain peoples, that's when we'd be resting, and then I'd be learning Bart, learning how to read Gurmukhi from Mahapurkha themselves directly, but then again sat in the Sangat, in the actual Diwan. But we was fortunate because there was somebody called Bhai Bahadur Singh who'd done, when he was a little baby, had actually got darshan of Baba Nand Singh Ji, who extended his life, and he would do katha in the evening at 8 o'clock, but he'd speak in English as well, which was very rare for back then. And so because you was breaking up then a bit, am I still okay?
Hanji.
Okay, so which was very rare for then, and it was like, oh, this guy, you know, he was again this Badr Singh who was about 60 then, and you wouldn't hear somebody do Gatha in English, and he would break into English, and it would like, oh wow, and I just loved listening to stories. So spending a lot of time sitting in the Darbar Sahib, listening to Kirtan, and then when I'd get to hear Sakhiyan, stories of Gurus and Mahapurkhs being told, it was just like, wow. And I just loved Sakhiyan. And so that was literally it, where I literally just jumped from this to this, like all full hog. And I didn't have opportunity to miss what I was missing at that point. But a year and a half later, I did fall off at the path. And then that was because of certain sangat I got back into, the company.
Baljit, how was your internal experience then? Because having been through some of that stuff in terms of alcohol and a different kind of lifestyle, I found personally a lot of peace from being in Sikhi. What was your experience going from kind of that type of negative addiction to something more of a positive addiction? What was your internal experience?
I think obviously it was a long time ago, but trying to remember it the best I can. I was always somebody I was quite an anxious person because of the lifestyle I led. There was a lot of people, kind of we had created a lot of enemies back then. So there's a lot of people that was wanting to jump me, and there was all sorts that comes with that lifestyle, with kind of the things that you get caught up in. So it was almost like an escape for me. But I think what was when you talk about a piece, I think what felt so unique and empowering about being a part of Nanak at that time was that they do Tarna style Kirtan. So in basically Tarna style Kirtan means when you read a couple of lines of Gurbani repetitively in a very kind of simple tune. And it was and these are things that Mahaprabhu that created from Baljit Singh Mastuana started Tarna style Kirtan. Baba Nand Singh Ji, Baba Ishya Singh Ji, Kleram Wale as well. They continued that way, and all it was with Rada Sahib, they would use tolkiyan. Jamte with Nanak Sahib, they used tamma, so atte da tamma, which is like the tabla with the atta on it, and it's really bassy. And Baba Nand Singh Ji would say that when you hit the tamma and that goonj jo pendi hai, when that sound comes the bass of the tabla, they said it's like literally hitting that Kalyug that takes over in your mind. It hits it in the head and awakens you from it.
Amazing.
And then we'd use Daliya, the bells. So there was always this, as somebody was still quite young, 16, 17, it was a catchy way. And I loved, because I used to love singing. So whenever we'd have a session, and I'd be the first one trying to do the boliyan and memorize songs and sing. I was like an entertainer, not on a professional level, but like just loved to entertain. So I always say that you kind of carry that same kind of energy that you've got about yourself. You just transfer it over. And then I took that excitement of singing with my mates, sessioning, into the Tarna style Kirtan, because even Gurbani was alien to me. But when you've got the same lines being repetitively sang for an hour, which was done every day, I'd be really excited. I'd want to sing the loudest. So it was like this jar, this excitement for this new way. And it was pure, because you haven't got the alcohol, the drinking, all the other stuff that comes with it. So I was like really excited. I was like, from the first time I wore a chola, white chola, and then to sit on the stage and sing behind the kirtanis, and I'd always try and sing as loud as I can. And then when we got, introduced to playing the taliya, it was like this, you have to learn the sequence, and Mahaprabhu would say to us, Baste bhi bethe bas Sikhi jao. Even when you sat on the bus, you just like, they'd be taught like in your head to just go ek do, and then they play the shan, which when they get really fast. So again, it was just like this kind of excitement to like, it was like a complete buzz. And the things that I was so into, dressing a certain way or style, and these things kind of start dropping off. And not to say like, I was perfect then, because there's still certain things that stick with you, certain things about you, like kaam. I came away from drinking, but then like that lust within, that didn't quite, simmer. And so that was still there in the background, which was the cause that kind of caused me to go downhill again. But your original question was that, like, that piece. It was more like, I would say, more than a piece. It was like this excitement for this new way of life, and being excited to go and sing behind the kirtanis. And I was always quite emotional anyway. So anything that was Bairagi, where it was that pull, and it spoke about love and this pull towards, the Guru Gobind Singh Ji or something, like, I connected to that at a deeper level. So I always from early on, I was always somebody that welled up got very passionate. And so like again, that transfer of energy of having that towards then before songs, and always getting into, like I said, relationships, and it kind of transfer that then. And yeah, so I'll describe it as this excitement, this new way.
That's amazing. Before we get into the second period, I want to ask you about kaam, because I struggled with that and I still do. And I think going back to what you said, I resonated with it because I feel like my lifestyle was so different before I got into Sikhi. It was like, try and go out with as many girls as you can, all this kind of stuff. It was very centered around trying to be the center of attention and look a certain way, have a persona, and be perceived a certain way. And I think shaking that, I found personally very difficult. And I do regret. I know we shouldn't have regret, but I do think, if I hadn't done this, if I hadn't done that, maybe it'd be easier to focus, maybe it'd be easier I'd have less vichar. And I think, not having spoken to many people about this, I don't think I've shared it publicly ever before, this conversation with Darshan, but I feel like a lot of things may struggle with this because they go from a completely different lifestyle where it's completely normalized to sexualize the opposite sex. And you're constantly bombarded with certain images. A certain desirable way of life is to go out with lots of girls or to have lots of relationships, and then you're shifted into a completely different way of life, which is the antithesis of that, where you're supposed to have one partner, monogamous relationships. You're meant to be modest. So can you talk about that?
Look, you know what? One thing I'm getting used to is the whole point of podcasting is it's an opportunity for us to be real, and it's not easy. Because in recent years I'm more real about my current mental state, but when it comes to then having to delve into that, and it's normally me interviewing other people, so I didn't even realize it can be like, oh, do I actually just say it as it was, and if I'm to be like very open, even when at that point originally, like I said, I had two shifts in my life. It was 97, but then it was like I learned a lot, I experienced a lot where Sikhi was concerned, but then it became a roller coaster and for many years. But I experienced a lot of grace during that time. There was a lot of bakshish. So there's a lot of solid groundwork done, and the experiences I had with Mahaprabhu. But like I said, the roller coaster. But the shift was about 2008 and 9. So originally at that point in 97, remember, I've grown up in an upbringing. There's certain things that shape you, which you don't realize the patterns until later. I had an experience very early as a child, that kind of played a part in shaping me and looking at life from a certain perspective. When we're talking about lust or sexually, and because of that childhood experience, like sexual experiences were then almost, to me, they were like, it was, how should I describe it? I would say it was like, to me, they were like, well, this is what life's about. And it was almost like that lifestyle was made to feel normal at a very young age. And so for me, where I had a lot of other friends growing up, yes, that you'd see others that were into girls and dating and flirting, but some not so much. Some were very grounded. But for me, like it was everything. And so when you've taken Amrit now, and even this lifestyle is very new to you. I hadn't even heard of a kashara before. Like to that point, like I didn't know like it was even a thing. Yeah. So when you go from that, literally that shift, and I knew, and in my head at that time, I think after a few months, it was like, yeah, I've given up drinking, well done. You know, I've changed my diet, well done again. You know, and all of these different things. You think, I've stopped smoking, amazing. Stop smoking weed, amazing. And then I think I need one thing. Yeah, and I was always a foodie anyway. And I was like, all right, I got my food. And then Holly, it was because even though I had got Sangat then, that, but there was still something missing, not from the Mahapurukhs, but the Sangat that was kind of other Sangat. You know, like, and some Sangat are slightly more relaxed about certain things. One of those things were then girls. So for me, and I thought, oh, this ain't that bad. You know, like I'm gonna like doing all of these things, but relationships that come on, that's not bad, is it? And so I kind of convinced myself. But like I said, it's a lifestyle of from literally from that being of 8, 9 years old, or like I said, of what I experienced and what I went through. Like I said, it's not like something I want to really go through in today's podcast, but it's like I said, it was an episode. It was like an episode of sexual abuse, but that plays a part in shaping you, which I didn't realize until a lot later in my life. Why then I was a certain way sexually, and and then you kind of you put it together, and so for me at that point it was, I could call it my weakness, but I even convinced myself, well, I'm doing so much of these other things. I've changed. What's so bad about that? As long as the girl's into Sikhi or whatever, and then it's okay. So I okayed it in my head, not realizing that when I was doing so much other stuff, learning part, doing seva, but then I started getting into relationships again at the same time. I wasn't quite given the tools by the certain sangat that I had, and instead it wasn't discouraged even that much. Obviously the Mahapurukhs would have, but you don't tell them that, do you? But there's always that guilt inside. So for me, when I started then getting into relationships again, which was probably quite early into this new lifestyle of when coming into Sikhi, I didn't realize how much energy that's going to take and how much of an emotional roller coaster I'm going to end up going on, how much it's going to actually end up playing with my rahat and discipline, and how it's going to end up bringing me back down, back into drinking. And so it was, for me, I didn't really deal with it for the first 10 years, you know, and it wasn't until I actually got married when it was 2008, and then I had my second switch. When my second switch was, I had everything on a worldly level, on what society would deem as success. I had a convertible car, I had lived with parents, beautiful house. We didn't have the burden of kharche mortgage because we lived with parents. Later on, we bought our own house, which we did burden ourselves with all of that. And so, like, money wasn't an issue. I got to marry the girl I wanted to marry, who I'd been with for on and off for the last 10 years, you know. And so, like, but there was Galesh at home, so there was like arguments, there was things didn't quite go as I expected when we got married, because of dynamics of people getting on. And I was just in this dilemma now. And at that point, it was, do I go back to that lifestyle of drinking, which I've left behind me now after getting married? Because my wife, even though she's from a different faith, very disciplined and dedicated and devoted to Sikhi. For her, like, it was a no-brainer. If I went back to drinking, marriage is done, over. Like, even though we've been together for 10 years. So it wasn't even a thing. For her, it was clear, black and white. If you ever go back to that, it's done. And so at that point, I had to kind of choose. So where do I go? Which way do I turn? And I remember walking out the house, thinking, I'm gonna just, because it had kicked off. There was such a bad argument at home. It wasn't so much me and my wife that was arguing. It was just arguing with the whole setup of the household. And but I was caught in the middle. And I remember it was like a really bad argument. I walked out the house and I thought, I'm gonna go to the pub. What's the point? I'm gonna drink, forget all of this. And at that point, I was like walking down the road and I just stopped. And I thought, man, like there was something that pulled me. There's still 10 years of that Barney being inside of you, and I came back and I went the other way instead. And I thought, I want to know what my guru saying to me. So that's when my relationship started, with wanting to know what good Barney is saying at a deeper level, from not really understanding it to starting to research into what is Japji Sahib, what is it, what is Sikhi, really Sikhi. This is after 10 years of getting into Sikhi but being in and out of it. And it's like, all right, what is Sikhi? Like wanting to change then the way I'd tie my dastar, from tying like the Nog style dastar and starting to tie then a gold dastar and trying the malla, and then starting to really look into different dekas. What is Gurbani saying? Started to research 1984. I always had a pull with something else anyway. Started to really dwell deep into what had happened in 84, from 78 all the way from 47, 78, and then 84, what happened. That was my switch then, day and night. But within that period, as I was switching, then I was only listening to Katha, listening to Gyani Thakur Singh at the time, a lot of their Katha, listening to Santji's speeches a lot. I came across Gurbani.org, translations of Professor Sahib Singh, the Faridkot Tika, and starting to understand Japji Sahib for myself, listening to Katha. And then at that point, coming back to the point of kaam now. Obviously, I'm married now anyway, but back in them days, like, Galyug, I would say, like, this time of what is referred to as the time of ignorance is so embedded in us. Even with your own partner, it was okay to notice and comment on other people that you thought, were pretty or had a certain type of body. But then something was changing now at my core. There was something speaking to me at a deeper level, that I couldn't do that anymore, but the lust was still there, but in a different way. There was a conflict now. It wasn't like you just looked at a girl and you carried on looking at her, and where it was like, but I was thinking, but I'm still looking at her, I'm still noticing. And so there's still that spark there. And I thought, all right, and you said there's a lot of people that would relate to this. What did I do then at that point? I thought I'm going to do something. And Bhai Gurdas Ji, where Bhai Gurdas Ji talks about Dekh Paraiyan, Changiyan, Mama, Pehna, Tiyan Jane. He says that look at others, Dekh Paraiyan, others, Changiyan, with a pure eye, Changiyan, and Mama, Pehna, Tiyan Jane. But Jane means to know them as your own mothers, sisters, and daughters. And I thought, well, I don't at the moment. So we've got to be truthful. This is where people fall. They're not truthful. They're not authentic. Yeah. And so I put my hands up to myself. I don't see them as my mothers and sisters. Like, they're just not. Yeah, I am finding them attractive in that sexual way. So I thought, okay then, Johnny, how can I see them as that then? So I actually did a thing step by step. So I was a gas engineer. When I'd be out in my van, and where before normally you notice somebody. So then now I'd notice someone, but then I had sat down and told myself what I'm gonna do based on that body. When I then see somebody that's similar age to me, which back then I was what, about 28, 29, Hannah, then I'd actually bring my sister's face forward, my actual blood sister, you know. And so I just got one sister, and then I'd actually envision her, bring her forward.
Wow.
If somebody was, then I'd say, oh, acha, he's the Barney. But I actually would see my sister, my actual sister, initially. And then say if they were dressed a certain way, and say if they had, like, you know, certain tight clothes on and revealing clothes on, and then I'd look that way, then I'd think, all right, so that's if my own sister walked into the room like that, would I judge her? And no, she's married. Say if I didn't have a say in anything, right? No. And but I'd have a choice in eye contact, in how, you know. So I thought, all right, so in that same way, this is my sister now, and I'd actually say, you know what, I'm just going to look away, and just out of that respect for my sister, I'm not going to go cat. I wouldn't look at my own sister's legs. I wouldn't look, you know. And so in that same way, I thought, either or, this is my sister, and I'm not going to look at her legs because this is my sister walking there. But at this point, I wasn't still seeing that person as my sister. I was still having to bring my sister into it. Yeah. And that was the first stage. I started doing that. And then I had a mantra, and I would actually say, oh, the mini pen, yeah. But my inside was catching up with it.
Wow.
Yeah. And then I'd say, oh, aata meri maa vargi hai. Then I'd start bringing my mum's face there. There was somebody younger, like, say, I don't know, 17, 18, and that we knew in the family, then I'd bring them into it. And then eventually I'd just say, oh, meri bhean vargi, oh, meri tii vargi hai. It's just, this is like my mom, this is like my sister. And it actually became normal, like that. Then I didn't have to bring the face in anymore. Then I was literally looking at them and thinking, this is my sister, this is my mother. But I had to go through the process. I had to do the work, the training. It didn't just happen. And I think this is what so many people expect. You've taken Umrah, oh, you're pervert, you're still flipping looking at Bibiya. Like, well, what did they do not to? I'm not saying like some crazy girba can't happen, and for that one in the bloody million, bang, done. Right? But let's be truthful. Well, most of us, it doesn't happen like that, does it? So we got to put some steps in place.
I think that's really useful, and I know a lot of people who are going to benefit from that, including myself. So I'm going to try that thought exercise. I really appreciate you sharing that and being so open. So if we move on to 2008 now, and then going from where it sounded like you were to where you are now, you've been doing Prachar, as you said, for 10 years. You've helped so many people are inspired by your messages. You have an ability to connect with people and convey a message in a very passionate way, which inspires people. So how did you go from 2008 to where you are now?
Again, you know, it was definitely a journey, but there was something already planted there. And a lot of people talk about manifestation nowadays and attraction, you know, law of attraction. But often we because we do it at a very shallow level, you know, just say these words like, yeah, I'm going to do this, I'm going to become that, and we don't quite see it happening. but it's quite odd because even as young as like 18, 19, so going back in the early days again, and we'll come back to this, I'll show you the connection. So when I was like 99, 2000, I'd imitate other people doing kata in the shower or even sitting on the toilet. Yeah. And I'd sometimes do it to my cousins and imitating somebody, another kata vajik, and I could just make my voice just like them. And like where everybody else of our age was into kirtan more, I was into kata more. So I had this natural pull towards Sant Baba Hardev Singh Lulawale, who did Katha, and I listened to their tapes of Guru Gobind Singh Ji's Jeevani, and so it was tapes then, the actual cassettes, and I had 10 cassettes. I was just flipping mind blown, man. Like I was like, yo, and so I would in the shower then. I used to envision myself doing like whatever panktiyan I understood at that time, and I thought, and for some reason there was a few that would stick out, like "Tithe tu samrat jithe koi na hai, othe teer rakh agni udhar mahe." So like that, you even protect in the fire of the womb, and I would envision myself, yeah, using the pankti and then breaking it down and telling it to Sangat that look, God even protects you where like nobody else can reach. And little did I know that I was gonna actually do that one day. And I did want to back then, even then when I was envisioning it and actually doing that. And so, but it didn't exist. As in, there was this Bahadur Singh who's in his 60s, who's done Darshana Baba, Nan Singh, Babesha Singh, and like they do Katha. They're not a kid that's born and bred in like Birmingham that grew up smoking weed. Like, there's no such thing as, there's no social media that you don't do Katha. You get it? So like, but I would be doing Katha in my head and in the shower and in the car when I was driving as well. So I would say that's where my journey started from for Katha.
Wow.
And then in year 2000, when I was 20, same Mahaprabhu that taught me Gurmukhi, Baiji Baba Gadan Singh, actually did bhajan to me. They looked at me, said, you're going to travel the world and you're going to speak from all types of stages, just like Bahadur Singh does. The Bahadur Singh, the one that told you that this Katha in Punjabi in English, went over my head, what they said. And when I would meet people on the bus, I'd start I'd start telling them a Sakhi. I was very passionate though. And then they'd sometimes come back and tell the Mahaprabhu, oh munda milya si, odo sanu baste sakhiyan sunaun lag piya. Yeah. Right. And so, but when I started to understand, understand to whatever level at that time in 2008, 9, after getting married, and I started to look into Gurbani, and when we'd just be sitting on a dinner table or something with relatives, and I'd just start going through, oh, you know what this means, Pavan Guru Bani Pata, and do you understand what this Dev Sarat Doida Idaya is? And that we're being watched by a day nanny and a night nanny, and we can't escape that every action's being watched and it's being recorded. And people started saying, oh, tuta Bahadur Singh wanga bolan lag piya, like, that you're talking like just like Uncle Ji, and tuta Gurbani de arth kar lag piya, you're translating Gurbani. And it was like, okay, but I was always very passionate, at that fire in me. And then we just started doing these Friday night Kirtan programs at home, and a lot of Sangat started attending because we had bought own home by then, and so it was easier for Sangat to come. And we do Kirtan like Rajan. Back then it was like a little kid, late teens, and he'd come and do Kirtan, and he had a really squeaky voice back then. And but then I I learned, because like I said, I wasn't very academic, and then I learned from my sister-in-law how to use PowerPoint. And at that time, I started reading Tika Sahibs because I listened to Mahaprabhu's Katha in Punjabi. I had this like I started understanding the language of Katha. So I started reading like Tika for myself, like Amir Pandar Tika, who's written by Gyani Kripal Singh, and who was the Vidyarthi of Baba Amir Singh, from the Taksal, from the Amritsar Taksal, and from by Mani Singh Taksal. And so their Tika was written in a lot of detail, and I started reading Tika like that and translating them, and started making these presentations during our Friday night programs. And then I would ask Sangat, oh, do you understand this? What do you think this means? And then I'd break it down for them, and I'd always then tell a Sakhi. I'd always research a Sakhi, and that's how my journey of doing Katha started. Then how did I start doing Katha on stage? I met a Gurmukh who we used to learn Gatka from, by Bhutta Singh. And then by Bhutta Singh, when he would do Kirtan and we would travel together up and down the country, even went to Europe, he'd be doing Kirtan and he'd translate the Shabad. And sometimes he'll just say to me, why don't you tell a Sakhi? He knew I loved telling Sakhi. He'd just say, tell a Sakhi. I'd always sit with him on the side Vajja, and I'd tell a Sakhi. And from that, I started doing Katha. I started getting called from different places, from Sikh channels started calling me, Scotland, and the journey started. Yeah.
That's amazing, Baisa. It's amazing to see in retrospect how the dots connect, which is fascinating. You see it with athletes sometimes, how they're not an overnight success. There's so much groundwork and there's so many little dots which connect to get them to where they are. And
It's that, like, you know, how you're saying it's some people say like, oh, we want to do prachar, and like, how did you learn? And I didn't, because I didn't go to a school where I learnt. I think the Mahaprabhu's Bachan, they saw something. But then the other thing was, I was never just satisfied from doing my Nityanem. It wasn't just like, yeah, let me get my Nityanem done. I remember when we had a huge mortgage to pay, we had bought this new house. I'd start doing Nityanem, and I was just like, I need to know what my Guru's saying to me. And literally, I'd put a kambal, like, you know, over my head, and I'd sometimes be just sat there reading an answer for 3 hours, because I just want to know, what is Guru Amardas Ji actually saying to me. And it was that contemplation, deep contemplation, again and again, going through, reciting those verses, and you don't realize then that's going to come out one day, you know. And it goes then deeper than just learning an art from Professor Sahib Singh. And if you look into the Jeevani of Professor Sahib Singh, they did similar things, where they were contemplating for days over a Shabad, you know, and it was just naturally happening. And then when you do an art on stage and people say, oh, that really stuck with me, because it came from a lot of contemplation. And it's difficult to talk about this because, you know, it's not like, because it's so, sometimes it can be easily taken as like arrogance, but I'm just literally sharing as it happened, you know. And it's like that journey before something is told.
yeah, I'm reading a book at the moment. It's called Originals. It's a very famous book in the kind of business world, and they look at Nobel Prize winners and a lot of intellectuals, and they found that novel and original ideas don't come from people who necessarily are very specialist and have gone by the book. They have a very broad set of skills, so they might be into lots of different things. They might read lots of different sources and lots of different information they've done, and that all adds to the ability to then create that idea. And they looked at the example of Martin Luther King Jr. And they said the speech that he said, that I have a dream speech, isn't what he had written, but he delivered a similar speech over 300 times that year. And so all the thoughts, all the ideas, all that experience, all that kind of, all of that culminated into that I have a dream speech, which is, you know, listed as the best oration in kind of political history, at least. So it really goes to show the depth, and it's really interesting. And I know I've taken up a lot of your time, and I know you do a lot of prachar. You're very candid, you're very honest, and I think it's refreshing, because I don't see many people being honest, and candid and open with regards to real life issues. So I just want to thank you and say it is really appreciated, and I think it is needed. From the patients that I see, I know there's a big kind of gaping space for people to be able to have the kind of conversations that you're enabling. So can we just end with talking about what you're working on at the moment, the weekly sessions, what's happening, what in your world, how are you helping, what are you doing in terms of the social media? If you could talk us through all of that, please.
Yeah, so about a year and a half ago, I just this kind of name kept coming to my mind, Journey of Compassion. And because I thought that whenever something great is born, it's born out of compassion. If you look at the greatest of organizations that are doing amazing humanitarian work, behind it, if you was to really dig down, it's born out of compassion. That, like, from that mother of compassion comes then that righteous path. And so I took that, and I thought, I want to be able to speak about mental health, but from a compassionate perspective, and not from a book knowledge kind of black and white clinical approach. Nothing wrong with, like, clinical approach, and but I'm just saying that it had to be more. It had to be like from here. And so that was born out of that the organization was from that journey of compassion, of looking at mental well-being from the lens of compassion, and from my own experiences, being able to understand people and being able to tap into our intuition when we're speaking to people and understanding them, and being connecting to them at a deeper level, on an energy level, and keeping compassion at the forefront. So out of that, when we look at the definition of compassion, is that when you got this urge or want for others' suffering to end.
Wow.
And that's, the Dalai Lama describes it that way, and that's a definition I've definitely embraced for myself. And when I looked at anxiety, depression, OCD, these different types of mental health issues that I personally have gone through, or still, struggle with, and I thought, I want to take an approach towards anxiety from compassion, of having that compassion of really wanting to end for people, and knowing that we can go on that journey where we don't have to live like that forever. So what we're doing currently, one of the things that we set up, it's been about a year now, was what I found was there's a lot of information, a lot of knowledge that we can pick up, a lot of wisdom that we can read that isn't yet our wisdom, but initially is our knowledge, but it's somebody's wisdom, be even the guru's words. But it's very quick. Somebody does their nittanam, bang, done. Somebody reads a few posts on Instagram, done. And I felt like we're missing that deep contemplation, which again the guru is trying to, that's what the guru's embedding in us, is Bani Birlo Bicharasi. Guru Sahib says it's only very few and rare that actually vichar, that contemplate these words deeply. Guru Gobind Singh Ji said the same. This says, if you want to connect to me, then this says, then jo mujh bachan karan ki chahe. Then they said that you've got to granth vichar suno chit lai. You've got to vichar the granth. You've got to contemplate the granth. Granth vichar suno. You've got to listen deeply, chit lai, with your complete consciousness. And so I thought we need a space where we can dive deep and contemplate. And so we created what are now known as the contemplation sessions. And we're contemplating currently on Japji Sahib. We're on the 16th stanza, and which we've been going through for a year now. But it's that space of what we call sangat. We do sangat. It's a place where it's uplifting energy, where you can uplift yourself, deepen your spiritual journey through the Guru's words, and get to start knowing yourself more. And so that's every Sundays, 6 till 7:30, and they've been life-changing for people. I didn't know what people are going through that are listening to it. We have about 50 people join every week on average. Global Sangat. We've had non-Punjabis that have now gone on to do other projects related to Sikhi. And so Global Sangat, you got somebody sitting in Australia, US, Canada, England, India. Some people join on from India at 12 o'clock at night. And I've had messages saying I'm a Sikh, I do Kirtan, but I've been self-harming for the last 15 years and we've stopped because of these sessions. And I've not once spoke about self-harming though, but because of the vibration and the power in it. Sometimes it's emotional, sometimes it's deep, it's interactive as well. So everyone gets an opportunity, and sometimes we'll do some guided meditations in them. So, people have said, I've been into Sikhi 20 years, but I felt dry, no emotion, and it feels like my heart's been like that stone, like heart's been melted, now can connect to people. And this comes from the back of these sessions. And what I do is, in the beginning, I used to put a presentation together, but what we found was when I come in raw, because I've already done the contemplation on Japji Sahib, I don't do a presentation. I make sure I know the words, as in like there's no words that are forgotten, what the literal meaning is, but I'll actually see what energy the Sangat gives me, and I do the art there and then on the spot. And that's where the magic is happening, and I'm learning from it myself. I need those sessions as much as anyone else. So yeah, like you can go on our website, journeyofcompassion.com, and just sign up for them. And if you sign up for them, if you miss the session, you'll get a private link for the recording. You'll get a newsletter sent out every Monday.
I'm going to sign up. And I urge everyone listening to this to sign up as well. What else is going on? I know you did a talk on mental health recently. I saw from your Instagram page there's the one-to-one sessions. Can you tell us more about what you're doing?
One sessions are born out of because I get contacted by so many people, and being somebody that wants to get back to everyone, but it's not physically possible. I just thought, like, what shall I do? How do I, how can I reach out to people that need a one-to-one conversation? So then we created this system, which we call one-to-ones with Baljit Singh, basically, and they're on Zoom, and you can go onto a website. Again, you can book a session, and those are paid for sessions. And again, like, they're donations, and you can book a package of 4 or 6 or a one-off. But again, we say to people, if you're not able to, if you're unable to afford it, or any other reason financially, email us and we'll definitely work something out for Sangat. And in that, I get to go deep one-to-one with somebody. And again, the shifts have been like amazing, immeasurable. And again, I was reluctant, people would put you off, you're not a professional, this, that. I said, I'm not claiming to be a professional, don't want to be a professional. I recommend people to professionals, but I'm not that. And I come from my personal experience, from, research of Gurbani and Itihas, and read about psychology as well. Read, like you said, all round. And really, like for me, I'm very much into energy. So it's about tapping into energy in that moment, and seeing what comes from that intuition and what somebody needs in that moment. So these, again, they've been magical. I've probably done about 60 sessions with different people, global again, all different walks of life. Again, I just did, one last night. They're just, it's amazing.
Brilliant. And can people access that through your website as well?
Yes, through the website again. And, I'm working on writing articles about specific topics. I've done about one about, becoming like a fragrance flower, becoming love. So, and I'm working on one at the moment about acceptance. And these things that people have got, these certain sayings that people say, oh, it was meant to be, God did that. And I was like, let's try and demystify these things, because they can be very damaging. And try and look at it from, as close as the truth that we can recognize through Gurbani, so that people aren't left feeling, bad and in a bad place. Working on a course as well, that I feel that Sikhs should have their own mental health, program that becomes recognized as our own steps. So there's a lot of work. There's a book potentially as well that's been worked on, based on the Mool Mantar. And yeah, so there's a few projects going on.
Exciting stuff. And within a year that you've done all of that, and you are doing all of that, is just commendable. But it shows that you're passionate about this. It means a lot to you. You want to help people, and without that, you wouldn't have been able to do all of this. So
Just finish. The main intent behind the page on Instagram for Journey of Compassion is that the content is it's chosen very, very consciously, so they can help people shift from a negative mindset, and that they're not sitting there thinking, I should feel guilty about something, or I should feel bad, where people are like allowing themselves to stay in this low negative energy. And it's all to get them to shift that and find some form of joy. So some of the posts, sometimes it looks easy, oh, it's just a post, but like there's hours gone into just tweaking even how the line of Gurbani is translated, to make sure that it's read and received accurately as possible and as well as it can be. And so there's a lot of thought that goes behind it.
Yeah, amazing, Seva. I will link to everything that we've talked about in the description box. So I would highly recommend checking it out. There's nothing like this that I know of out there. So it's really a massive seva that the community really needs. So thank you so much for everything you've done so far, Faisal, and Pulchuk Mark, and forgive any mistakes.